Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Lee, I'm 28. I started out on TikTok and I'm trying to come over here on YouTube. Thanks for clicking on my video. Thanks for watching. This is my coming out story. Obviously, I think everyone's coming out story is a little more complex than one can usually kind of summarize for a video. This is 7 pages long. I wrote it out. If I actually truly wrote it all out, it'd probably be 1,000 pages. So this is everything kind of summarized, smushed together to give you a general understanding of what it was like for me coming out. Like I said, I am 28. My name is Lee. I am a non-binary lesbian. This is mostly me talking about coming out as a lesbian. I realized I was non-binary. I guess I could talk about that in like a different video, but most of my story I feel like is around my first time coming out as, you know, once I'd come out as lesbian and been, you know, queer for a while, I kind of added on the non-binary piece, and, you know, that's been what it is. Anyways, okay. So when I look back at my childhood as who I am now, I can so clearly see the signs of my lesbianism. But back then I believed that it being having gay feelings was not only wrong, but a sin and not even like a true feeling. I was raised in a very conservative Christian home on the coast of North Carolina. I'm also borderline. I have borderline personality disorder. If you don't know what that is, Google it. I could make another video about that if wanted. So it's kind of hard to piece apart like what was me having a codependent relationship or friendship attachment versus like me liking girls, you know. I think they were both kind of weaved within the other. For instance, there was never a moment in my childhood where I was not like severely attached to a girlfriend of mine. During preschool and elementary school, it was obviously more of like the BPD codependent attachment, but as we, you know, progress into middle school and high school, I think my sexuality had a little bit more of a play in it, a play in my attachments. So the first time, I'm gonna kind of jump around. I was gonna try to like write this from like birth to, you know, but that doesn't make sense. I'm just kind of jump around, so just, you know, bear with me there. The first time I can recall having a gay thought was I was 14 and I was in the psych ward for the first time. And I had made these two friends that both said that they were queer, and this was one of the first times I had ever met someone my age who identified as gay. And I remember feeling uneasy and uncomfortable around the subject because I was, you know, like anti-gay or anti-LGBT, whatever, homophobic for so long. I remember feeling uneasy around them because of that, but like around the subject, but I didn't turn away from them because of how comfortable they made me feel in like my mental illness, because it was the first time meeting people who understood that side of me as well. One evening, one of the doctors walked in to the group room and she had like shorter length, dark black hair and these like piercing eyes and was very tall and wore these like black heels and this black suit. And the second the doctor left, my friends turned to the other and is like, man, I'd love to sleep with her. And I just laughed and looked away. I like chuckled, looked away, and I vividly remember thinking in my head like, me too. And then immediately just shoving that feeling down and telling myself I was wrong, immoral, sinful, and simply not true. I was like, nope, that can't, like literally shoved it down. I remember the exact moment and was like, nope, gonna push that down farther. We're not gonna, no. So when I came out at 18, it was a shock to, I feel like, most of the people who thought they knew me throughout my life. As like during middle school, I was your typical like boy crazy kid. I remember having the biggest crush on a boy in the grade below me who happened to be like family friends. Obsessed was a little bit of an understatement. For over a year, this boy was like all I could think about, and I'd send him, you know, 5 texts to every one text he sent me. He obviously like never showed much interest. Funny thing is he turned out gay too, so hey, I see you. Looking back, this was definitely more of like my borderline BPD craving of attention rather than it being like about the boy. but he was pretty feminine, so that also tracks too. I think I was so outwardly boy crazy to try and compensate for the lack of feelings I actually had for them, and to make me appear and feel more normal. Because being raised as a woman, especially in a conservative Christian home, you're supposed to grow up, marry the prince, you know, find your Prince Charming, meet a man, fall in love, become his housewife, you know, have his babies. And I never really felt that, but I knew I was supposed to feel that. So I think I just wanted to be so boy crazy, or I was so boy crazy because I wanted to make up for this lack of feeling I was actually having. I even dated several guys throughout middle school and high school, but when looking back like on our relationships, I very clearly wanted nothing more than a friendship between us. My first kiss happened in 6th grade with my first boyfriend. We were at a pool party and walked around to a private little corner where everyone knew we were going to kiss. 30 minutes go by, and I'm sitting on these steps, and I'm like, are you gonna kiss me or not? Like, are you gonna do it, or can we go back to the party? Because, you know, girls can't make the first move. We can't be forward. I had to wait for him. So finally, he leans over, kisses me, misses like half my lips, you know, gives you like the quickest little peck ever. My first real kiss was in 8th grade, I think, with a different boy who decided to shove his tongue down my throat right after I had revealed or opened up to him about my mental health struggles. Because, you know, I guess he thought that was the perfect time. And I remember going home and telling my mom about it, and she was so excited because my whole life she was always like, kissing boys is so much fun. Like, what boys do you like? Like, tell me about it. And she was like, tell me all about it. Like, what, did you love it? Was it so much fun? And I was like, no, it was gross, and I hated it. And she was like, oh, no, don't worry. Like, sometimes you have to train them, and you'll get used to it. And I was like, okay. And so then the next like few boyfriends I had, I would try to like train them, aka tell them not to shove their tongue down my throat, and it would work, I guess, for like a little bit, but by work I mean that instead of wanting to throw up while I kissed them, I was just like bored and wondering when it was gonna be over. Obviously nothing ever progressed past making out with any boy I dated, but I always said it was because I was very firm in saving myself for marriage. I wore my promise ring proud and very relieved that I didn't have to think about sex with a man for a very, very long time. Obviously, the second I came out, I was like, screw saving myself for marriage, never mind. But we're getting ahead of the story here. Being from a Christian home, I was raised to believe being gay was a sin, immoral, disgusting, shameful, yada, 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 yada. So anytime I noticed myself having feelings for girls, I'd immediately shut it down by telling myself that they just weren't real. I also was obviously anti-gay rights until around age 17. I had the usual Christian upbringing of having my parents, you know, cover my eyes when a gay couple came on TV, and, you know, hearing them talk about how gross it was to seeing two girls kissing. I remember my mom and my aunt were hooked on Grey's Anatomy at this one point. During its first few seasons back in like 2005 to like 2008, so I was roughly like 9 to 12. They usually watched it while me and my cousins were like off playing, and because obviously it was a show full of sex and a dozen other inappropriate things for like good Christian women to be watching, you know? Now when I remember this scene that I saw, it's interesting because, so Grey's became my comfort show later in life, but at this point I obviously knew nothing about the show. My memory is of my cousin and I running into the room to ask our moms something, and I vividly remember of a scene of two girls on a bench or swing kissing. And that's who I now know to be Callie and Erica Hans on Meredith's front porch swing kissing. But the weirdest part is I have watched Grey's Anatomy in its entirety 10 plus times, and I have never come across this scene that I remember of Callie Torres and Erica Hans on the front porch on Meredith's swing kissing. Like I have looked for it so many times and I can't see it, but I vividly remember this scene. And I also obviously remember my mom, my aunt, and like my aunt's sister like all freaking out. pausing the TV, telling us to cover our eyes, go away. And I tried to be the good little Christian girl, and not look. But there was just something that felt so exciting about seeing these two women, Callie and Erica, kiss. I was just like, that sparks something. That makes me go, ooh, But I was like, no, bad. Most of my childhood was spent being homeschooled or attending like a private Christian elementary school. But during middle school, I decided to randomly transfer to a local public school. That in it of itself is another story on its own, and I would love to share more about my schooling journey. If you have any interest in that, let me know. It was a roller coaster, to say the least. But middle school, I was still, homophobic. I had a friend or two who confessed to me they had like practiced kissing with their other friend who was a girl a few times. And I can't quite remember my full reaction to this, though I can't imagine it was anything supportive or kind. I'm sure I expressed my disgust and disappointment, but I know that my friend was never like a heavy Christian, so I'm sure I chalked it up on like, that's not, her heart isn't in the right place or whatever. So I have debated back and forth about saying the church's name on here, and I'm just gonna do it because they were awful to me and I shouldn't have to hide their identity for being bad people, This is Willow saying hi. Hi, Willow. Yeah. So I started attending South Banks Community Church, which is a non-denominational church. I'll lay that out right there, because that just makes no. Anyways, I started attending in like 5th grade, and continued to be active in the church up until I was 18. My parents never really found a church in town that they loved, so they often kind of jumped around every few years. But I stayed at South Banks because my best friend being so heavily involved in the church because of her mom. Her mom, like I said, was the pastor's right-hand woman. She worked for the church. Sunday service was never my favorite. I'll say now, I am not religious anymore. So Sunday service was never my favorite. I hated waking up early on the weekend, and the sermons bored the crap out of me. I found the dramatics of my fellow churchgoers raising their arms to pray, crying out in pain, and the pastor and congregation circling them and surrounding them in prayer. A little predatory, to say the least. I won't get into all that, though. I mostly attended youth group, as the handful of leaders we had throughout the years always cultivated a seemingly safe space for me to share my struggles. Though I'm no longer spiritual or have any belief in the Christian faith, I still credit a few of these people as my saving graces during a really, dark time in my life. So youth group was something I look forward to every week, even if a few of the other kids that attended, aka the pastor's son, tended to be more judgmental of my adventures. AKA I dated too many guys, and I liked to go to Warped Tour and obsess over bands of men covered in tattoos. That, Mind you, I was a sheltered kid. I was homeschooled mostly. I never smoked, I never drank, I never snuck out, I never did anything bad, went to parties. But for some reason, I just still bugged a lot of the people at the church. Because I guess, wasn't perfect. I was never as perfect as my best friend was or had to be. Still though, I was always right there next to her. I danced during holiday services. I even spent my whole freshman year of high school sitting in her mom's office at the back of the church doing schoolwork, because after being pulled out of public high school, I was pulled out due to mental health, and then I couldn't really be trusted to be home alone. So I was homeschooled my freshman year with my best friend and her mom. So almost every day of the week, I would spend running around the back rooms of the church with my best friends, playing outside in the yard, bothering the pastor and any other church goer that came by during the week. The summer before I came out, in 2014, I was 17 years old. I was admitted to my first residential treatment facility, where I not only fell into several codependent relationships, but I also ended up kissing my first girl. One of the codependent relationships I had was with my best friend in there. I remember the exact moment this friend came up to me and asked if I wanted to share a earbud to listen to her iPod with her, because we were allowed to have iPods. And as we both listened to her grunge-filled playlist of Elliott Smith and The Neighborhood, I looked at her in awe and felt so much comfort and warmth just being next to her. I definitely remember just like seeing her and just like being, I just didn't know what I felt. Like, I knew I felt more than a friendship. But I was also there, like, so upset over this boy that I had a relationship with, who really I just had a very strong connection with, and I was hurt by the fact that, like, it ended how it did. So there was so many, like, confusing thoughts going in my head. I was like, saying I was there, upset over this boy, and obviously a thousand other mental health reasons. The boy was not the reason I was there, but that was one thing I, said, like, I talked about there. But then also, like, feeling these feelings for my best friend there, I was like, it was just wild. I obviously didn't fully know it then, but I definitely had feelings for her throughout our time there, which just made the codependent borderline part of me way worse. After a few months, my friend ended up leaving, and I was left with a whole new house because of a lodge switch with everyone, like, under and over 18. It was, like, a bunch of us, but then they took out everyone that was over 18 and put in a bunch of other people that were under 18. So I was 17 at the time, so I had to stay. So I ended up being with just a bunch of people I didn't know. The rehab I was in, it was Timberline Knolls in Illinois. It's not there anymore. They had several lodges for different ages. And the lodge I was in had a big, like, milieu, which is like just like a common room, like a common living room area in the center. And then hallways that stretched out to, like, bedrooms, and, like, there was a nurse's station. And then, but then the hallway that I was in was, like, way, like, here, like, around, down this hallway, here was the bathrooms, down another hallway, and then my rooms were, like, way in the back. So it took a good walk to get there, like, for people to come check on you. So because the hallway was so far away from the common area and the nurse's station and the rest of the rooms, we nicknamed it Alaska. One night, we were all there, just sitting out in the corner. We were, supposed to be asleep, of course, but there were 4 to 6 girls, all of us sitting in a circle, daring one another to do anything we could come up with, in our sheltered little space in rehab. Eventually, one of the girls dared another girl, who I think was named Caitlin, to kiss somebody in the circle. And I remember repeating in my head over and over, please be me, please be me, please be me. Don't know why. Weird. I was like, why am I thinking that? Why do I want, whatever. She picked me. She leaned over, kissed me. I remember feeling really confused because it wasn't like I had thought it would be. I truly thought if I kissed a girl and was actually gay, that, like, the sunshine would beam on me and the birds would sing and it would be like this big movie moment. But none of that happened, obviously. I was in rehab, incredibly suicidal, severely depressed, and I had randomly kissed some girl I didn't even know. So of course, like, the world didn't stop spinning. But in my head, this was my proof that I wasn't gay, So when I came back from rehab, at the end of the summer, my church had started a Celebrate Recovery program, which is a faith-based recovery program for anybody, like, struggling with addiction or mental health issues that just wants, like, some extra support. These meetings were every Monday night, and I was ecstatic, to say the least. I have battled almost my whole life with bad self-harm, or all of my teenage years and into my 20s, I struggled with a bad self-harm addiction. So seeing that my church began a recovery faith-based program, I felt like it was a sign from God or whatever. They were doing this for me. I don't know. So when I had first come back from treatment, I had met up with my 2 friends, one of them being my best friend that I attended church with all the time. And I casually kind of confessed that I had kissed a girl, but, like, really quickly followed it up with, oh, but, like, I realized that's how I know I'm not gay. Like, I realized I'm not gay, yay, I'm trying to, like, laugh my way out of the uncomfortable situation that I had put myself in there. My best friend was shocked and wondered when I had even changed my view on the LGBT community. And I told her my views had changed early in the year when I had dated a really sweet boy who had a heart-to-heart conversation with me about his views of supporting love, and he opened my eyes up to a lot of things that I had previously been sheltered to. And I had silently began reevaluating some of my Christian views, conveniently, right before rehab. I just hadn't mentioned it for fear of backlash, obviously. I knew then that my best friend wasn't happy, and I think this is like the start of when she kind of started distancing herself slowly. So at this point, it's November. I was freshly 18. I had turned 18 in September. And attending Celebrate Recovery every Monday night, youth group every Sunday, continuing to help and hang around the church as they had recently moved into a new building, which, fun fact, was actually a midnight rodeo before, where they had like a mechanical bull, and I really wanted them to keep the mechanical bull, but they sold the mechanical bull when they moved in. Lame. The day I came out to myself was Thanksgiving 2014, and I was at my aunt's house for our usual like big family Thanksgiving. I often spent those days in the basement where there was a pool table, a TV, and a lot less overstimulation. This specific Thanksgiving, I remember being so confused internally, like surrounding my sexuality. I had kissed a girl in rehab, realized that that wasn't me, but I had also had all these feelings, and I was just so confused. I ended up texting two of my friends that day, one of them being my best friend that I've been talking about, and then one of them being a really good friend of mine from dance whose sister had recently come out as gay. So I texted both of them the same thing separately. I just said, hey, I think I like girls. And my one friend from dance was incredibly supportive, kind, was like, I will support you no matter what. I'm here for you. My best friend, all she said was that was the devil working in me. So after that response, I knew I wouldn't really feel safe talking to her about these feelings anymore. But the final kind of aha moment for me, that fully like solidified my knowledge in my lesbianism, was me Googling Kristen Stewart and clicking on images and scrolling. And I remember audibly being like, and that was that. That was the final straw that broke the back of the cardboard camel that I had so preciously crafted throughout my life. I was gay, but now what? I couldn't keep it to myself for longer than like a week or so before I woke my mom up late one night and I made her guess because I didn't want to say it. And the first thing she guessed was, "Are you pregnant?" And I was like, no. And the second thing she guessed was, "Are you gay?" And I just kind of looked at her and was like, yeah. And she was like, "I knew it, you cut your hair." Because I had recently chopped off all my hair. I turned 18 and finally was able to like chop off all my hair. And I shaved it into like this little pixie cut. Here's a photo. A few days later, I told my dad and my brother. My dad responded, "Me too. See, you're just like me. I like girls, now you like girls." All in all, my family has been incredible since my coming out. They have really reevaluated their understanding of the LGBT community and their believed connection with the Bible, and, realizing that it was never a sin and the Bible never really actually says anything about it. Another week or so went by and I ended up in my first women-loving women relationship, and I told my close group of dance friends, who all but one of them showed complete love and happiness for my exploration in my sexuality. It was very sweet. I was nervous to tell my best friend though, obviously, because of what she had said a few weeks prior, that the devil was working in me. And I had also recently told my internet best friend, who I'd been best friends with for like 3 or so years, who said nothing more than, "Delete me from your phone and delete me from your life." So, to say the least, I was a little nervous about revealing this and losing the closest friend I have ever had, So instead of telling her mom, and the rest of the church, I just simply updated my Facebook status to, in a relationship with said girl. Pretty much immediately, my best friend stopped texting me. She wouldn't talk to me at youth group or Celebrate Recovery, and every time I stepped into the church, I could just feel everyone's eyes on me, judging me, but only willing to vocalize their disgust behind closed doors instead of to my face. November came and went, and December felt like 10 years in one. Sorry, I didn't think I would get emotional reading this because I didn't get emotional typing this, but my best friend's birthday was a few days after Christmas, and I was with our mutual friend. I just kind of jokingly asked her, the friend that I was with, to send a happy birthday text to my best friend, and that I would send one too, and that, she probably wouldn't respond to me. Yeah, we both texted her, and within minutes, my friend had gotten a response that was also an invitation to the friend's birthday party that night, and I never got a response, nor was I invited to my best friend's 18th birthday party. Honestly, the saddest part is, I've actually never told anybody this, that I had been working on for like months at that point, like a little video of like a bunch of photos and videos of us together, and a little speech, which sounds so lame, leading up for her 18th. We had, spent almost 10 years attached to the hip, and 18 was a big milestone for us both. But her birthday came and went. The video and speech were left untouched on my computer, and ironically, the gift that I had gotten online for her arrived shattered in pieces. So that was kind of a sign. January 5th came around, or maybe it was the 6th, I'm not quite sure. We had just had youth group the night prior, and during that meeting I had finally asked to bring up the elephant in the room, as nothing had been the same amongst us since I had come out about a month or so prior. I had brought it up only to get a few words in before my best friend stormed out of the room, and the pastor's son, who also attended youth group, started just going off on me. He was screaming about how sinful my actions were and quoting Bible verses until I had just had enough of it. I couldn't get a word in, and I stormed out of the room. No one stood up for me, not my best friend, not my youth leaders, not the pastor. After I had enough, obviously, from him, I stormed out, and I tried one more time to get my best friend to talk to me. I quite literally chased her around the church, trying to corner her in any room area possible just to get her to talk to me, even if that meant, and ended up with her screaming at me, being angry at me, telling me she'd never want to see me again. I wanted anything from her but silence, and she refused. The next day was Celebrate Recovery, and after our meeting that night, that my best friend did not attend because she had recently started joining another Celebrate Recovery break-off group for some unknown reason. She didn't want to be around me. Alright, so anyways, after that, her mom asked if she could talk to me for a minute in a side room. And so I sat down with the woman who was practically my second mom at this point. She had seen me at my worst in psych wards. She had opened up to me about her childhood and her mental health struggles in childhood. Her and my best friend had cradled me in their arms as I cried and wanted to, do bad things to myself so many times. They saved me so many times. They picked me up off the floor, my best friend and her mom. So I was sitting down with this woman that I thought I loved, and she began asking me what I thought I was doing. I really tried to remain calm, but it wasn't long before I was just sobbing, and she was telling me how hard this had been on my best friend. I remember her saying, "Do you know how hard this is on her? How hard this is on everybody in the church, everybody around you?" Her final words before I ran out crying, because I couldn't get a word in, and not that I could even muster out a word, but her final words were, "Being gay is not welcome here, so you are not welcome here." Which is kind of ironic because South Bank's slogan is "All are welcome here." Right? Yeah. So as I ran out of the church that night, I ran past my best friend, and I looked at her as I'm sobbing, and I'll never forget the look on her face. It was sad, it was angry, it was confused, it was broken. I felt like almost I was running past a mirror, which I wish I could say a lot more about. I can't, because I want this to focus on the church and her mom's actions and not hers. But she stood like a statue that night when I ran out in the pouring rain. I was driving home with all my windows rolled down. And I'm not a Taylor Swift fan, but in that moment, for some reason, I was playing Taylor Swift Wildest Dreams, because all I wanted in that moment and from that moment on is for her to just always remember me and remember us and the time that we had together. So since coming out at 18, I went to a college where I was able to express myself fully. I moved away from my hometown, realized I'm not only a lesbian, but non-binary as well. It's been over 10 years of being out and proud, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I've tried over the years to contact my childhood best friend, but she still to this day refuses to acknowledge my existence. It's taken a really long time for me not to blame myself for everything that happened. And even now, I still feel a lot of shame and guilt for how I handled things, especially soon after our split. I was angry at her for a really long time, my best friend, and I don't hold any anger for her anymore. I still hold anger, in a sense, for the church and her mom and the pastor and everything like that. Not as intensely as I have, because I've worked through that a lot. I had a lot of anger for my best friend right after, and I regret that. I've realized that her mother controls far more than I ever imagined or could have imagined, and I think that her mom was and is the deciding factor when it comes to our friendship. I know her mom got really angry when I tried to spread the news that South Banks had kicked me out for being gay, refusing that she ever did such a thing. The pastor never said a word to me throughout this whole thing, and eventually he did, a few years later, reach out on Facebook saying that he would call to talk soon, after I had made a public Facebook post just upset about how things had gone down. So I gave him my number, and years went by with no phone call. I ended up having to move back to my hometown at the end of 2020 due to an abusive friend from college, somewhere I promised I'd never end up again. It was really hard staying in that town, seeing the church, my old friends, but in a sense being behind like a glass wall, kind of like at a zoo. I would gawk and stare but remain silent, refusing to acknowledge that I had ever been a part of their lives. When I finally was able to leave my hometown once and for all in 2022, I wrote a long letter to the pastor and mailed it out the morning I left. I had never gotten the chance to tell him my story, or my side of it. So yeah, that's what I did. I just wholeheartedly put out everything that had happened, what his son had said. I wrote it all out, even including the awful remarks I received from his very own son. I expressed that I didn't want, nor did I expect, a response. I hadn't gotten one years prior. Why would I get one then? Instead, I left him with the raw events from that night and ended the letter stating he has never been anything more than a coward. Coming out is something queer folks have to do almost every single day, so truly my story never ends. But these were my roots, a summary of my confusing feelings and the reactions of those around me. I truly could go on and on about the subtle signs of my queer identity, like my closet doors that were fully collaged with magazine clippings of Miley Cyrus, or how I refused to pick between Team Jacob or Team Edward in middle school and declared a new team of Team Alice. How I always fixated on the tie-dye girl from Parent Trap, Shigo from Kim Possible, Sam from Danny Phantom, the list goes on. I think I will forever be piecing apart my childhood to find the small signs of my true self, as I spent so much of it hiding behind who I thought I was supposed to be. I am so grateful for all those in my life, now and from the past, who have never faltered in their love for me. If you're watching this, you know who you are, and I thank you. I also want to thank all those watching and supporting me on this platform. I started on TikTok, I'm over on Instagram, and have been trying to get my leg out of here on YouTube. And I'm soon to be launching my own little community over on Brand Army, where we can hang out and have no filter of YouTube, TikTok restrictions. I can curse all I want and garden as much as I want, so stay tuned for that. All the links will be in the description, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you want to see more from me. And I appreciate each and every one of you and would love to hear from you in the comments below. I'm sending you all my love, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to my story.